Qatar has called for talks to end a major diplomatic row which has seen Saudi Arabia and several other countries cut links with the Gulf state. They accuse the Gulf nation of supporting terrorism. The Qatari foreign minister denies this and says the measures were unjustified. In Qatar itself, you can see from these pictures here, there are reports of people stockpiling food, empty shelves there. The government, though, is saying that the dispute will not affect normal life. Our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins has just sent a report from Doha's airport.
Here at Qatar's main airport, Doha International, the early evidence of the blockade is very clear to see. The departures board covered in red cancelled signs alongside a host of flights by Gulf operators to neighbouring Gulf states who are putting pressure on Qatar. So there are cancellations, for instance, to Bahrain, to Dubai, to Abu Dhabi. And as well as that, there are cancellations to Egypt, one of the countries that's applying this new pressure on Qatar and its emir, accusing Qatar of actively supporting Islamist extremism, of supporting jihadis, and of being far too close to Iran. Now, these are claims that Qatar strenuously denies and say that they are the result of lies and manipulation. But nevertheless, this is a very serious rift, arguably the most serious, between countries meant to be allies in the Gulf Cooperation Council. The Americans have already made clear that they don't believe it will have any impact on their alliance with Gulf countries against so-called Islamic State, against Daesh. But nevertheless, the Americans are worried by any signs of a rift within the Gulf allies they so much rely upon.
James Robbins there in Doha, and you heard him mention Egypt. Let's take you straight there. The BBC's Angie Ghanem is monitoring the story for us from Cairo. Angie, good to see you. Tell us how this story is being covered in Egypt.
Well, the story, if you're talking about the media, the state and private media are supporting the decision, cheering it, and explaining why the government took this decision to join cutting the relationship with Qatar. On social media, it's divided. There are people who are supporting it and saying that Qatar has not stopped hurting the region in general, but others are warning of friction and disunity in an already very volatile region.
Yeah, Angie, we've been hearing from the Qatari government that this is not going to impact on normal life, but people are obviously worried there. What are you hearing about the concerns of Qataris?
There are concerns because 40% of the food comes through a land route from Saudi Arabia, so this is quite significant. Once people heard about the news yesterday, we've been seeing lots of posts of people posting images of pictures at supermarkets, long queues, people stockpiling food. There are also people who are Egyptians working in Qatar. They're very worried about their destiny, what's going to happen to them. Are they going to be asked to leave the country? So there are also all sorts of worry about that. If this continues, it will definitely have an impact on life in Qatar in general. But also people are looking today at the Kuwaiti mediation. The usual role of Kuwait is to mediate such crisis in the Gulf. So today it's a day where everyone is looking at Kuwait and whether they will be able to mediate between Saudi Arabia mainly and Qatar to end the crisis and not let it drag for longer.
What solutions would Kuwait be considering at the moment, Angie?
Well, it's the crisis between Qatar and the Gulf in general and Egypt with them has been, since 2011. So it's not new, and the negotiations and the mediations are happening. Such escalation happened mainly, with people are linking it in a way to the recent crisis between Qatar and Saudi Arabia regarding some statement by the emir, the Qatari emir, as well as the visit by US President Trump to Saudi Arabia. So Kuwait now is practically going to say that Qatar probably now learned the lesson and understand this gravity of the situation. So let's go back to the table and discuss what it could happen. Yesterday, the Qatari emir was giving a speech on Al Jazeera, and the speech was cut before the end of it. And the channel later on said that the Qatari is in consultation before talking to the nation, which means that the royal family in Qatar itself is also mediating in the issue and trying to find solution out of this unprecedented situation actually in the Gulf.
Angie, thanks so much for joining us from Cairo. Let's bring you up to date with some other news now.
Hello everybody, I'm Aaron Hazelhurst. Welcome to the programme. We've got about 8.5 minutes. There's lots going on. Let's get cracking. Let's start with the diplomatic row enveloping Qatar. It's certainly having a big knock-on effect for business. Now, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, that's the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt are just some of the countries to cut ties with Doha because they say Qatar is supporting terrorism, something which Qatar denies. Now, one of the most heavily disrupted industries right there, it's aviation. Countries including Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have closed their airspace to Qatari planes. Well, basically, we're talking about Qatar Airways. And as you can see, take a look at this. This is fascinating. Here you go. Here is a map that just shows you, well, shows you Qatar Airways flights having to go around those particular airspaces and basically take a longer route to get out or into Doha. So there you go. Let's stay on this subject. Theo Leggett, our business correspondent, joins us. Theo, always good to see you. Theo, longer routes means burning more fuel. Burning more fuel means burning more dollars.
Absolutely. It's going to cost them more because they're having to fly further. But the knock-on effects for passengers, the disruption this causes is, if anything, more severe. Now, Qatar's a state-backed airline. The Qatari government is pretty rich. They can afford some short-term extra fuel. But for passengers who are facing delays of an hour or two on their flights, this could be something much more serious. Don't forget that Doha doesn't have a great pool of passengers of its own. There are only 2.5 million people living in the country. So what they are is a hub-and-spoke airline. They get passengers from one place, they fly into Doha, and they fly out somewhere else, long haul to long haul. And of course, if you can't fly to many of the destinations that people want to go to, that's going to cut the number of passengers you'll be willing to carry. And a lot of its passengers also come from elsewhere in the region. So that's a big problem for Qatar Airways.
And actually, I'm just wondering now, just from what you said there, that Qat being a hub, there's other hubs down there, not far away, right? You've got Etihad, which is in Abu Dhabi, and you've got Emirates, which is in Dubai. Qatar's pain could be those guys' gain.
Potentially, because if you're planning to fly from, say, London to Singapore via the Middle East, if you can't go through Doha, you might as well go through Dubai, and you know that you're a lot less likely to face disruption at the moment if you're flying via Dubai.
And Qatar's also being, apart from maybe a bit of extra fuel and some of this disruption, but being blocked, basically, from some of its most important Middle East markets. Right? Riyadh, Cairo, things like that.
And that has a knock-on effect for Doha's attempts to position itself as one of the Middle Eastern business capitals. If people can't get to it from the other crucial markets, then that's a big problem.
Indeed. Theo, I know you're going to keep across it. We'll talk to you very soon. In fact, I'll talk to you again on GMT in just an hour or so time. Thanks, Theo. OK.